basically what we're going to be looking at is what the nephron loop does, okay, and then what the nephron loop does makes it possible to concentrate our urine. Okay, if you think about that idea, concentrating the urine, it's harder than you might think. You know, we can only do that one of two ways. We can either take water out or add more solute, right? Those are our two options. We talked yesterday a little about how the body adds more solute, right? A little bit about secretion. Well, the other piece is the take the water out, okay? So if you take the water out, then you have much higher, highly concentrated urine. Now, why would the body want to do that? To lose less water. You know, remember, in the end, we have about the same amount of waste products we produce every day, but our water intake changes. So we need to take the same waste products and put it either in more water if we're fluid overloaded, or less water if we're dry. Okay, so this is going to be how that works. Okay, so antidiuretic hormone comes from the posterior pituitary. We're going to talk about the mechanisms at the end. ADH does what its name implies. It's an antidiuretic hormone, so it blocks diuresis. All right, so what we see here is an example of what happens when ADH goes down. Okay, remember, like so many things in the body, ADH isn't on or off, right? It's a spectrum. It can be maximally released or minimally released, but it's almost never totally off or on. Okay, so here we are sitting at a normal osmolarity, okay, up here at 500, let's say, and a normal urine flow rate, normal amount of urinary solute excretion. Okay, so time along the x. This is how much solute are we putting out. This is how much urine volume are we putting out per minute. And then this is the osmolarity. Okay, so we have a challenge. We drink a liter of free water, right? So what is going to happen to our osmolarity? Well, we're going to see it drop a hair, right? Because we took the same amount of solute, we added water. So osmolarity goes down. That small reduction in osmolarity is going to cause a reduction in the release of ADH. So ADH levels will go down as we add water, okay? So once ADH levels go down, what happens? Okay, well, first off, we have a change in our urine osmolarity. We go from high osmolarity to very low osmolarity. Why? We are reducing the concentration of our urine. ADH secretion is reduced, so we have less concentrated, i.e., more dilute urine. So more dilute is less osmolarity. Okay, so that's what we see in the urine. More dilute. Visually, what you see, very dark yellow urine becomes very water-like urine, okay, when ADH levels fall. Now, what about flow rate? Well, as our urine becomes more dilute, there becomes more of it, right? So we increase our urine flow rate, and that helps us to get rid of the extra free water that we just added. Now, the interesting thing is our urinary solute excretion barely changes. That's the magic of this system. We can dramatically increase our urine output without changing the amount of solute we're excreting per minute. Remember, this is the point of the kidney, right, is waste product excretion. Now, this graph, the opposite would also be true, right? If we were dry, we would see antidiuretic hormone increase, and all of these would flip. Our urinary flow rate would decrease, our urinary osmolality and osmolarity would increase, but our solute excretion wouldn't change. Same idea. We can get rid of the same amount of solute in a lot of urine or in a little bit of urine, right? And that is the effect of ADH. So when ADH is high, then we have a high urine osmolarity. The urine is very concentrated, it's very dark, it has a very powerful smell, right? When ADH is absent or low, the urine becomes really dilute. And it's a huge range, like 1,400 milliosmoles per liter at maximum ADH, 50 at minimum ADH. So like that's a difference of like 90 times. Maybe that's not quite that much. Anyway, we want 28 times. So 20 liters per day of urine we can produce if we need to. Now, of course, we would only do that if we were taking in that much fluid, right? You know, it's all osmolarity based. Okay, so ADH responds to osmolarity by changing urine concentration and flow rate. Now, what makes this important is this point right here. ADH is the only system that can change the volume and concentration of the urine without changing solute excretion. In other words, we're still excreting the same amount of waste products. We're just doing so in a different amount of fluid. So it makes ADH really critical to our fluid balance. So even if, and the other way to look at this is it separates the fluid balance role of the kidney from the waste removal role of the kidney. It means the kidney can do both. It can continue its waste removal role even as it adjusts plasma volume. So this is osmolarity of the urine, right? Filtrate becomes urine when ADH is very low. Okay, so when would that be? That's fluid overload, right? Our osmolarity is low. We have too much water for the amount of solute that we have. Okay, so what are the patterns that we see? Filtration, just like normal. Sodium and water reabsorption, just like normal. That's always happening, right? That's obligate. All right, now, so water and solute reabsorb together, so the osmolarity of the urine stays about the same as that of the blood, because we're removing both solute and water in about the same amounts. Okay? Now we make the bend and head down. As we descend, as we go down, water leaves. Water is reabsorbed, but solutes are not. Because remember, this area, permeable to water, not permeable to solutes. Okay? So water is going to come out, and the solutes can't. So what will happen to the osmolarity of the fluid in here? Well, it's going to increase, right? Because we're pulling the water out. We're concentrating it. That's where we are here. All right, now we're going to make the bend around and head up, ascending loop now. Okay, so as we go up the ascending loop, we have a bunch of sodium reabsorption. Remember, this is the thick limb, or the thick part of the ascending loop is where we get the biggest effect here. So as the fluid, which is concentrated by the water leaving, as it goes up, it is then diluted by the solute being pulled out, right? So first we took the water out, then we pumped the solute out. So by the time we get here to the distal convoluted tubule, we have very dilute urine, more dilute than it was when it started, right? So at this point, the nephron loop has not really done anything but dilute the urine. Now, okay, and we'll talk about how that all fits together in a minute. So the DCT and the collecting system, okay, water channels are absent in these areas from here on out down because the water channels in these areas are ADH sensitive. If ADH is absent, water aquaporins don't exist in the distal part of the nephron. So water is trapped. It can't get out. So what will happen? Well, we have this very low osmolality, or osmolarity, low osmolarity, but the water can't leave. So we're going to have urine that has a very low osmolarity, just like we saw in our first diagram. So when ADH is low, we create a lot of urine that has a low osmolarity because our dilute urine is trapped, the water in it is trapped by the absence of ADH. All right, so the only time we get this pattern is when ADH is very, very low, okay? Which doesn't happen very often. There are sometimes, there is head injuries, for example, will sort of confuse the posterior pituitary, and you'll release ADH when you shouldn't, and you can have a problem with your posterior pituitary where you don't release ADH at all, right? So that would give you this example. But mostly this is about the mechanism. If water can't move in the distal part of the nephron, you're going to have a lot of dilute urine. Now, yes?
So does ADH only work in the DCT and collecting? Okay.
Correct. Its one job is to get aquaporins installed in those places.
Okay. So like all of the stuff before that is like normal?
Yep, this is happening all the time.
That's just, okay.
Yep. So this is all obligate,
Okay.
all happening all the time. ADH is just about the water moving at the end. Okay, so why not just have urine like this all the time? Well, our water intake, our water requirements would be much, much higher. Okay, we'd have to drink 20 liters of fluid every day. That's a lot, right? Now, for us human beings in our modern world, we could probably pull it off. But our animal friends couldn't. You know, they would spend all their time drinking. So what evolved is the ability to concentrate urine. In other words, to take the same amount of solute and put it in a smaller volume so that the organism has less water they need to find. Okay, so to form concentrated urine, we need ADH, step number one, and we need the renal medulla to have a high osmolarity, like I pointed out over here, right? This area of the kidney needs to have a high osmolarity in order to pull the water out. How do we get that? That's the tricky bit. This is easy. ADH is easy. Aquaporins are easy. It's the concentration gradient that's tricky. Okay? So what causes the buildup of solute in that middle part of the kidney? Well, number one, massive transport of sodium ions. Okay, remember the thick ascending limb is all about sodium transport. Most of the oxygen that the kidney consumes is moving sodium, right? So there's a lot of this. So active transport of sodium and the co-transport of other molecules out of the ascending limb and into the medullary interstitium. I think it's the first time I've used that word. When we talk about the interstitium, it's the spaces in between the main structures. Okay, so like in the kidney, you have a lot of nephrons, right? So you have a lot of tubule parts. At any given part of the kidney, there's a lot of bits of tubule. The interstitium is the area in between the tubules. Okay, now that interstitium is where we're going to develop our high osmolarity. Okay, so active transport of sodium, active transport from the collecting ducts into the interstitium, facilitated diffusion of urea, and then some diffusion of water. Okay, I like to look at this in pictures instead and in a chart, so we're going to come back to that. Okay, so if we look down this is moving through the nephron, okay, and this is comparing active sodium transport, water permeability, salt permeability, urea permeability, okay? So we can see proximal tubule, where we have all our obligate reabsorption, across the board permeable to everything, right? So all of those things are going to be reabsorbed. In the thin descending limb, lots of water permeability, right? No active transport. In the thin ascending limb, there's our weird spot, right? No water permeability, okay? Thick ascending limb, lots of sodium transport, no water permeability, okay? Then we get to the distal. Now we see ADH playing a role, right? ADH is going to control water permeability in the distal part of the nephron. Okay, when ADH is present, it'll be permeable to water. When ADH is absent, it won't be permeable to water.